Hello, dear saints in Christ. The title of this essay, as written originally on my Substack called The Orthodox Scribe, is The Light and Darkest Mordor, an essay on The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. Now, J.R.R. Tolkien has adamantly stated that The Lord of the Rings is not an allegory. In fact, he and C.S. Lewis often got into arguments over this subject, friendly arguments. And, neither is it a theological treatise, of course, and yet it may be one of the most powerful expressions of Christian truth in modern literature, not because it preaches doctrine, but because it embodies it. Tolkien, a devout Catholic and close friend of C.S. Lewis, eventually admitted in a paper he wrote, quote, "The Lord of the Rings is, of course, a fundamentally religious and Catholic work, unconsciously so at first, but consciously in the revision." So, before you go down to the comments and say, oh, there aren't any, Christian allegories whatsoever in The Lord of the Rings, and Tolkien did not intend it to be that way. From Tolkien himself, again, The Lord of the Rings is, of course, a fundamentally religious and Catholic work, unconsciously so at first, but consciously in the revision. He wrote that in, it's called The Letters of J.R.R. Tolkien, which were edited by Humphrey, Carpenter. I'll put my sources in the description. So the story reveals the deep structure of Christian faith in its view of evil, providence, humility, sacrifice, and redemption. As a former Lutheran pastor, just as an Orthodox Christian, I believe every Christian should read Tolkien's epic fantasy. Its scope is vast, yet its moral vision is simple and clear. The lowly are exalted, and the proud fall, as Mary sings in her Magnificat, and Luke 1:52. And evil consumes itself, and light shines in the darkness, even when it seems like the darkness will win. So let's then briefly walk through each volume of the trilogy and see what this work offers to the people of God. So the first section is titled The Fellowship of the Ring, the Weakness that Bears the Burden. Now, much as the Gospels begin not with a mighty king, but a lowly infant in a manger, Tolkien begins not with kings or emperors, but with hobbits, small, unassuming folk who love gardens and second breakfasts. When the dark power of the One Ring resurfaces, it's not given to the mighty this time, but to Frodo Baggins, an ordinary hobbit with no ambition for greatness. His calling echoes God's modus operandi of choosing the lowly for his great purposes. As St. Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 1:27, God has chosen the foolish things of the world to put to shame the wise, and God has chosen the weak things of the world to put to shame the things which are mighty. Now, Frodo's journey begins with a simple act of obedience, taking the ring away from the Shire. But the moment he steps into the wilderness, the spiritual weight of his task becomes clear. The ring isn't just a burden, it's also temptation, a corrupting force that whispers to its bearer, drawing him insidiously toward power and pride. And Gandalf, the wise wizard, refuses to take the ring, saying, "With that power I should have power too great and terrible. Do not tempt me." And Gandalf understands what Luther, now I may be Orthodox, but there are some really good things we can still draw from Luther. So Gandalf understands what Luther called the theology of glory, which is the temptation to seek God's work through strength, control, and visible success. Instead, Tolkien uses Frodo to embrace weakness, humility, and the way of the cross. And Tolkien also introduces Aragorn, of course, the hidden yet prophesied king of Gondor, who serves as a humble ranger rather than claiming his throne. His refusal to grasp power too soon echoes Christ's state of humiliation in his incarnation, as it is written in Philippians 2, beginning with verse 6, who, being in the form of God, did not consider it robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, taking the form of a bondservant and coming in the likeness of men. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even the death of the cross. So the Fellowship of the Ring ends in fracture. Boromir, noble but proud, tries to take the ring by force and falls, yet redeems himself as he dies protecting his hobbit companions. The Fellowship is then scattered, and yet even here, Providence is at work. Frodo presses on, not because of his strength, but because of grace working through friendship and faithfulness, which is embodied in Samwise Gamgee. So now the second section of the essay is the Two Towers, the struggle against despair and the hidden providence. Now this volume deepens the theological stakes as Frodo and Sam journey alone into the darkness of Mordor. The story also follows Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli as they defend the realms of men against the rising tide of evil. In fact, it follows those three most in the second book. And one of the most striking elements in The Two Towers is Tolkien's portrayal of hope and despair. The world seems lost. Through Saruman, Sauron has corrupted the forest and twisted nature itself, which is rather indicative of Romans 8:20 through 23. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it in hope, because the creation itself also will be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation groans and labors with birth pangs together until now. Not only that, but we also, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, eagerly waiting for the adoption, the redemption of our body. And so, that's the corruption of the forest and the twisted nature itself. And, of course, the orcs multiply. The kings of men are failing spectacularly. But Tolkien reminds us that even in the worst places, hope is never absent. As Sam says to Frodo, there's some good in the world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for. Now, this echoes, I think a good Lutheran thought that God's work is often hidden under suffering and failure. In Latin, it's usually referred to as Deus absconditus, God hidden, or God absconded. Luther wrote, God works by contrary so that a man feels himself to be lost in the very moment when he is being saved. So Luther's point within his treatise, the Heidelberg Disputation of 1518, is that God often hides his grace beneath the very things that seem to destroy us, hence the cross. And I think we Orthodox can agree with that. Sam and Frodo don't feel victorious, but they're being used by Providence in ways they can't understand. We also meet the infamous Gollum, more fully in this book. He is both pitiful and treacherous, which to me is a picture of sin's distortion. And yet, Frodo shows him mercy. When Sam urges caution, Frodo says, the quest stands upon the edge of a knife. Stray but a little, and it will fail to the ruin of all. But I do pity him. And now here's the gospel tension. Justice must be done, but mercy is still possible. Now, Frodo remembers that he too could fall to the ring's power just as Gollum had. So he has mercy on him. Gollum's presence is a continual reminder that the ring's corruption, or sin, deforms. But grace can still reach the corrupted. And the volume ends with the Battle of Helm's Deep, a desperate last stand. But even here, salvation comes from unexpected quarters. Gandalf's return at dawn with reinforcements. It's a picture of Easter victory or Pascha victory after long Good Friday suffering. Gandalf says, or much earlier, to Aragorn, "Look to my coming at first light on the 5th day. At dawn, look to the east." So the eastward direction may be no accident on Tolkien's part. I don't know if he did this on purpose or not. But, from the early centuries of the church, Christians have traditionally built their sanctuary so that the altar faces east, because traditionally, in Christian tradition, the east always symbolizes the resurrection of Christ. West symbolizes Satan. It's a practice known as ad orientem, meaning toward the east. And this has been done, again, for symbolic purposes, as I said. The east being the rising of the sun. The Christians have associated this with the resurrection of Christ, who rose early in the morning on the first day of the week, according to Mark 16, verse 2. And the physical rising of the sun became a symbol of the Son of Righteousness who rose from the grave, as prophesied in Malachi 4, verse 2. So this is done all over in every single Orthodox church. Same thing with Lutheran churches, although sometimes there are accidents. Like, I went to seminary, Concordia Seminary, and we have a chapel there. And it was intended that the altar face east, but for whatever reason, it was accidentally built facing the west, and so we would jokingly call it liturgical east. Anyway, facing east during worship became an expression of hope in the resurrection and expectation of Christ's return. And it's really, as Jesus himself said in Matthew 24:47, "For as the lightning comes from east and flashes to the west, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be." So Jesus himself said his coming will start. You can expect to see him from the east. So really, we take it literally, not just symbolically. So as worshipers, we orient ourselves liturgically and spiritually toward the direction of Christ's advent and eternal morning. So anyway, while Gandalf's coming from the east may not be allegory exactly, it is rich with Christian meaning. Light breaks in the east and the sun rises. Resurrection will cross the proverbial horizon. So now the final section is the return of the king, of course, the triumph of humility and the healing of the world. And this final volume is most explicitly Christological, which is why it's my favorite book and my favorite movie. Aragorn finally claims his rightful place as king, not through conquest, but by entering the paths of the dead first. A descent into shadow and death itself, which was indeed prophetical in the books. Only through this can he bring life and victory as king. He literally has to pass through death first, the paths of the dead. And this makes him a clear echo of the Christus Victor model of the atonement. Christ descends into death, into Hades, and rises victorious, leading the captives free. As Tolkien writes in the novel, the hands of the kings are the hands of a healer, and so shall the rightful king be known. Indeed, Aragorn literally gains powers of healing and uses it to save Faramir from near death, which they frustratingly don't show in the 2003 film adaptation. And this quote echoes Isaiah's messianic prophecy in Isaiah 53. "Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, and by his stripes we are healed." Meanwhile, Frodo and Sam approach Mount Doom. Frodo is now utterly exhausted, his spirit crushed, his strength gone. Sam must carry him, saying, "I can't carry it for you," referring to the ring, "but I can carry you." It's a beautiful moment in the books and the film And this moment of vicarious love is perhaps the most gospel-rich moment in the trilogy. Many Christian readers argue Sam represents Christ here, but I'm of the opinion that he actually represents Simon of Cyrene. Not that this was intentional on Tolkien's part. It most likely wasn't. Nonetheless, just as this African man, Simon of Cyrene, helped Christ bear his cross for a little while, so Sam helped Frodo bear his cross, the One Ring, for a time. And just as it was still up to Christ to bear his cross to the end, so Sam eventually had to put down Frodo for him to bear the ring to the end. That was Frodo's role. The moment also reflects the Christian vocation of bearing one another's burdens, as St. Paul writes in Galatians 6, verse 2, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ, where we too become a Simon of Cyrene for somebody by helping them bear their cross for a little while. And fans of Lord of the Rings like to say everyone needs a Sam. Even more, everyone needs a Simon. Lutheran pastor Dietrich Bonhoeffer, in writing about the ministry of bearing, he expertly delineates this. He says, the Christian must suffer and endure the brother. It is only when he is a burden that another person is really a brother and not merely an object to be manipulated. The burden of men was so heavy for God himself that he had to endure the cross. But he bore them as a mother carries a child, as a shepherd enfolds the lost lamb that has been found. In bearing with men, God maintained fellowship with them. It is the law of Christ that was fulfilled in the cross, and Christians must share in this law. What is more important, now that the law of Christ has been fulfilled, they can bear with their brethren. End quote. But at the end, as I'm sure you know, Frodo fails. Now, he claims, or at least tries to claim the ring for himself, and Gollum in his final act takes the ring and accidentally falls into the fire with it in the struggle. Evil, in the end, destroys itself. Just as David prays in Psalm 57, verse 6, they have prepared a net for my steps, they being the wicked. My soul is bowed down, they have dug a pit for me. Into the midst of it they themselves have fallen. So in the end, evil destroys itself. The quest to destroy the ring succeeds, not through strength, but through mercy, weakness, and providence. Yet Frodo can't return to normal life. He's too wounded. His soul has become too broken by the weight of the One Ring. Thus he sails west to the undying lands, Valinor, a vision of heaven. And this isn't because he earned it. It's because his suffering made him so broken that he can no longer live in the Shire. And Sam, grounded and faithful, returns to live out his days in peace. His final words are simple. Well, I'm back. So the true final section, just 2 paragraphs, is called the Eucatastrophe and the Christian Imagination. So Tolkien coined the term Eucatastrophe, which is a wordplay on Eucharist, to describe the sudden, unexpected turn toward good in the face of overwhelming evil. He wrote, quote, "It is a sudden, happy turn and a story which pierces you with a joy that brings tears, a glimpse of joy, joy beyond the walls of the world, poignant as grief," end quote. And he has joy capitalized there. This is the Christian story, right? It's the resurrection. The Lord of the Rings compels Christians to see the world sacramentally, to recognize that weakness is strength, humility is victory, light shines in the darkness, and joy is coming. It doesn't preach, it embodies the cruciform pattern of history leading to the return of our King. Furthermore, it teaches us to resist evil with good and to persevere by faith and hope. It teaches us that in the end, the king will return. So that's my essay on the Lord of the Rings. Again, I will put my sources in the description. I hope you enjoyed this, and may it. Hope it's given you some learning. Don't follow me; follow Christ instead.